Hello and welcome to the Citrix Workforce Continuity and Future of Work webinar. Today my name is Ken Liska. I am the Senior Manager of our Pre-Sales Engineering team for the Citrix Public Sector State and Local Group. I'm joined today by Kyle Edgeworth, the Deputy CIO of the City of Corona, California. What we'd like to discuss today is powering a better way to work through Citrix. What are the threats to business continuity and business and workforce continuity in your environment? What's the real difference between a business continuity plan and workforce continuity? Have a discussion with Kyle on City of Corona, what they've done to have basically a business continuity first approach to all of their IT decisions. And then building on that, with all the concerns around the COVID-19 virus and the pandemic that's going on right now, what can you do today with technology you already own from Citrix? And what can you quickly do to help build your business continuity plan going forward? So, a very brief introduction to Citrix. Citrix has been around since 1989. What our core has always been is connecting the user to the work they need to do. We started off with virtualizing applications. So it was back in the days when a user would get a computer, the IT staff would have to go to their desktop, install all their apps. Every couple of years, a new computer comes out, IT staff's got to return to the desktops, got to reinstall all the apps every time there's an update, anytime they get a new computer, data's got to move around. So what Citrix did is they virtualized those applications within the data center and then securely delivered them down to the endpoint through a very thin protocol that let them use very little bandwidth. Over the years, it's evolved into providing desktops as well as just applications. Today, it provides an entire workspace experience where not only can the users get their applications and their desktops, you can present web pages or SaaS applications to them as well. You can present content. Their files can be organized and stored right with them. This also works across all devices they may have. It's not just limited to Windows PCs and Macs anymore. It works on Linux, iPads, Android devices, Chromebooks, just straight up web pages. Doesn't really matter what they have. But the key feature that Citrix is always focused on that differentiates us from other companies is that we focus on what is the user experience like? What can we do to make the experience for the user better without sacrificing security or functionality for that user? Now, the focus today is going to be around how Citrix technologies could help you prepare for continuity events, such as a natural disaster, a pandemic, power outages, and personal events. And specifically today, what's in the big news right now is the COVID-19 virus. What Citrix can do to help your organization plan to have a work from home initiative that may not already be in place or needs to be augmented to handle a larger workload. So the first step is, what do you really need to plan for? So when your business continuity planning basically starts with fault tolerance, you're going to have your individual applications or your services you're offering to your employees and or your citizens. You're going to want to make sure those have service level agreements. They don't go down. You're going to want to back them up. That's typically a device level function. High availability, or just immediate failovers. A step above fault tolerance is going to be disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is where you start focusing on, okay, we've had an outage. Now, how do we get back up and running as fast as possible? And RTO is how quickly, recovery time objective, we need to come back up. Or RPO, recovery point objective, how much data are we comfortable losing before we regain operations with your environment? These are all decisions that we made as part of your BCP planning process. Now, after you've covered securing your servers and your data and your applications and your content, and you have a plan in place to make sure it's fault tolerant and you have your disaster recovery plan, you need to think about your workforce. What's your workforce continuity plan? How are your workers going to get to this new data center or this new location for their work? Is it the same site? Typically what an organization will do is they'll introduce the concept of a global server load balancing, often abbreviated GSLB. And that's where the users always go to the same address to access their work. And it figures out if a site is down, it just sends it to the next site. But you also have to figure out at this, if a user is working from home, do they have access to the same applications they do if they tend to usually work in the office? And if they do have access, is it secure? What organizations typically do at this point is they'll offer a VPN style solution where the VPN will install client software on the user's device or use a web browser. The user will authenticate and maybe check out or go through other security policies. Once they're allowed in, they now connect into the office or the remote site they were supposed to work out of. From there, they're now transferring data back and forth from the office or back to the PC, which could accrue a lot of time. It could also accrue extra security vulnerabilities. Now, if users are taking data and they're putting it from the office and they're copying it to a local device, it's now subject to whatever virus scanning or malicious software could be there. You now might run into a data leakage policy where users are now taking data out of the data center and they're keeping it on their device. So you want to try and find a solution that makes sure it complies with any standards and regulations your environment has to do, while also allowing users to work efficiently while keeping performance in their work. This is all encompassed in a business continuity plan. So the business continuity plan looks at those three buckets, and it also takes that extra step of figuring out what does the business need in the case of a disaster, in the case of we can't send employees into the office, what do we need to keep up and running in the state and local area? What do we need to do to keep citizen services going? How do we make sure that people can still access the important data they need to do to go day to day? How does the health department still get their employees to be able to function if they're working from home? How do pharmacists still get prescriptions approved through a system that has to be cleared through a state agency or town agency? You got to make sure you've thought about all those operations. You want to make sure you've thought about who needs access to what and where and how they're going to get it, and then put something in place to do it. What we find today is organizations are very good at planning for fault tolerance. They're pretty good at planning for disaster recovery. Overall, I would say average for workforce continuity. There are work from home initiatives, but they tend not to be organization wide. Depending on how mobile your organization is to begin with. If you have an organization that works mostly in the office, what we find is there tends not to be much of a plan outside. You can get your email on your phone. So we're going to discuss a couple options today of what else you can do for your organization to prepare in the case of a business continuity event. Now, a couple of things have to be considered. First, you have to look from the end user perspective. What is the end user concerned about during a business continuity event, besides their own personal welfare, safety, and health of their family? If they're trying to do their work, they want to know, can I still get to the apps and data I need to do my job? It's great if they have a laptop, if you're doing a work from home laptop. But if the data they need to get to is not on that laptop and they don't know how to get to it, they can't work. If they have an application on that requires them to be in the office to work with the data for security reasons, they still have a problem now because they're no longer in the office. They can no longer interface with that data. Does everything still work in the same way? Maybe if they go into a continuity operation, there's a separate set of icons or a special folder of links they use to do their job. Maybe you send out an email that gives them new instructions. But there needs to be a plan in place that the users need to understand where to look for the data, because they're going to be just as confused as the organization. So the clearer the communication is and the more upfront it is before an event actually occurs, the easier it'll be to maintain continuity during an event. And then finally, can the users still be productive? Depending on what the event is, are the users going to need to relocate? Are you going to need to refer operations over to a different area of the country? If you're a state, for example, if there's a large power outage, it's causing a continuity event in your main headquarters and you have a backup site somewhere else, you have to consider the employees that are stationed in that same power grid area as your office. Do they have another area to go to work in? In the case of a pandemic, like the COVID situation, it's more along the lines of, my users are going to be stationed at home now for a while. Well, without having to go into the office, are they going to be able to complete the jobs and tasks they do over email, over file sharing? Are they still able to do their job, or is it something that absolutely has to be done in the office? And if it has to be done in the office, is there a way we can still securely deliver it outside? That's the question. And this is where we get into the IT side of the business continuity scenarios. On the IT side, everything has to be rapid. Events like this tend to unfold quickly without a lot of warning. And if there is warning, it tends to be only days instead of weeks or months. So a business needs to be able to say, hey, this event is happening. How can I quickly get as many of my users operational and functional again as soon as possible? Is the environment I'm currently supporting, is it flexible enough where I can spin up more users or suddenly put an extra 1,000 users or 2,000 or 10,000 users remotely exiting the system? Am I going to have to go and install software or give instructions to 10,000 users on how to grab a piece of VPN client software and then walk them through how to setting it up? Do we have to give out more RSA or third-party multi-factor tokens? And these are all things the IT staff considers on their end. And they also consider security. Now you have users working from home, interface with data, as I mentioned before. Are they leaving data outside your environment? Is there now extra security concerns where stuff that usually wouldn't leave your building is now viewable outside your building? Are files leaving? Are you losing control of it? These are all the concerns and considerations the IT staff has. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn the presentation over to Kyle Edgeworth. He's Deputy CIO of City of Corona, California, where they've undertaken a journey to try and redesign the IT of the city around business continuity as its primary grounding. Kyle?
Thank you, Ken. The city of Corona is located just east of Orange County in Southern California. We have roughly 160,000 plus residents. Our city backs up right up against the Cleveland National Forest, and as in Southern California, we are surrounded by earthquakes and fault lines. We live close to the San Andreas Fault, and there actually is an earthquake fault that runs directly through the city. When I came to the city roughly 4 years ago, the city's business continuity plan was a disaster or data center that was located a mile away on the other side of a freeway. We knew there was a better way. I came from the private sector and understood and utilized the cloud and its resources. Moving to a hybrid model, we knew that we could utilize the cloud as a cloud first strategy where it made sense. Roughly, we have about 80% of the city's infrastructure that's now located in the cloud, and we're leveraging the benefits of that. But roughly 2 years ago, the city CIO and myself were at a conference when a large fire broke out in the city, right in the mountains right behind. Many citizens were being evacuated, and our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, was activated, and all key personnel were located in the Situation Room where they were making decisions. Everyone but our IT management, since we were located in another state at a conference. So we spoke to our IT staff and had them go down to the Emergency Operations Center, get the phones set up, get the computers all set up and going. But as with most emergency operations centers, these computers are rarely used. They're old, slow, and they're outdated. And since they've been off, they needed updates. So this really delayed getting the resources that our emergency staff needed quickly and efficiently. While we were at the conference, we were able to find a quiet spot, and we jumped on a phone call to talk to the key staff and key management. And as I was sitting there thinking, I thought there has to be a better way. We virtualized our server infrastructure, but we left out one key component in the discussion of business continuity, and that is the desktops. We had our servers backed up in the cloud, but if there was a major earthquake that disabled the on-premise infrastructure of our desktops, how would the staff and emergency personnel be able to access those city resources that are located in the cloud? So we did some research, and we actually flew out to Citrix and spoke with them about our vision. And our vision was really extending the infrastructure to the edge. We really wanted our users to be able to access their information from anywhere. It doesn't matter where they're at. We wanted them to have access to the documents, their applications, the resources, everything that they were accustomed to from their desktop computer. So we really wanted to give that data right to the edge, but it had to be secure. It had to be highly, highly reliable because we're talking about public safety and their data. It also had to be cost effective. We're talking about public tax dollars. For us, the city never invested in a VDI infrastructure because of the high capital expenditure. But this is where the cloud has its benefit. We really sat down and worked with Citrix and Microsoft and their teams, their engineers, and we were able to work on a solution that solved all these issues. We're now able to be agile. We're able to scale up and down our desktops based on demand. We're able to provide that access to the environment from any device, anywhere in the world, while it's also being secure. Citrix provides that great, clean front end, and we're able to leverage at the back end the Azure government stack to provide that government compliance that we are required to have. Windows 10 multi-session in Azure also provided that rich Windows 10 experience that our end users are used to. but significantly reducing that expense in Azure. As the COVID-19 pandemic evolves and the discussions in the city are changing of how we're going to cope with the needs of our workforce and the city's needs, it's been one of those great conversations to have with our management and tell them from a technology standpoint, we have a solution in place to support all the city's operations as necessary anywhere in the world. It's been a long road, but getting our infrastructure properly set up and in place to support it. But now we have a great end-to-end business continuity plan in production that supports all of our city's needs.
Thank you very much, Kyle. And thank you for being a good customer.
Thank you.
We're glad we could help you with your continuity needs. So what I wanted to shift into now is Citrix effectively has 4 primary pillars that can be leveraged for a business continuity plan. Now, these are not exclusive. These can be mix and match in whatever combination makes sense for your environment. So the first one is going to be the Citrix Gateway. This is effectively a remote sign-on through a web browser to your virtual apps, desktops, your web pages you need to get to, or SaaS applications. So if you have a set of employees that need to work from home and all they do is access internal websites or SaaS applications you'd like to maintain in the access from your organization security through, Citrix Gateway is a solution for that. It can also present out published apps and desktops for them as part of the second solution, which is Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. This is the traditional, what most people know Citrix for, op system. This is your virtualized Windows or Linux desktops and Windows or Linux applications that are running in the data center and presented securely to your users wherever they happen to be. If they're internal, they just go directly to the services. If they're external, they'll access the environment through the Citrix Gateway service as part of how that works. Now, for existing customers, if you suddenly need to scale up and get more users to do a work from home approach, using Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop is the most enterprise ready of those solutions. It does require additional hardware to run on, because whether you're doing shared desktops or individual desktops virtualized in a virtual environment, you'll need to create those desktops and either run somewhere in the resources. Further on down the scenarios here, I'll give you another one that does not require that extra added resources. The next use case is using Citrix Cloud on public cloud. If you don't want to spin up resource, it's the same thing as the last one, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops. If you don't want to, if you're not a current customer, or if you don't have the infrastructure to expand your environment internally on your on-premise environment, you can leverage the public cloud, and you can leverage the Citrix Cloud control plane. You can also leverage an additional feature known as Citrix Managed Desktops inside the Microsoft Azure environment. I'll touch on that in a moment as well. The final method, and this is what we see the most interest in when it comes to backup capacity or backup continuity planning, is remote PC access. This is where Citrix installs our virtual agent onto the actual desktop devices used by your users within your organization. So when they need to work remotely from home or stay at home all of a sudden, you don't have to spin up a special virtual desktop environment for them. They connect directly into the same desktop they would work on if they were in the office. All that's needed is to make sure the bandwidth is there to support that, which is minimal with Citrix, but just to make sure it's there, and the access method can support the amount of connections you're putting into the environment. So now I'm going to dive a little deeper into these methods. So the first one, this is the method where the users come in, or externally or internally, come to your environment. They're they get a web browser, or they're launching a published application. So you're either just serving them bits of data directly to a web client that they're using on their device. The next method is a shared desktop. This is where you're running a Windows server-based operating system, and multiple users are running what they believe is a full desktop image, but they're actually all running on that same physical server. This is a very popular method. It's the most cost-effective for enterprises. What we see the most usage in, even with VDI environments. Users still get that look and feel of running on a Windows 10 desktop when it's actually a Windows server, and you get better scalability out of the environment because you no longer have to dedicate an individual Windows operating system for every individual user. The drawback to this is you cannot install workloads that need to be running on a Windows desktop. Certain workloads have certain requirements that just don't scale, that don't work in a multi-user environment, and then you have to go to a personal desktop. This is also, the organizations will also tend to go to a pooled desktop approach when they have multiple different sets of users that need similar working conditions that they have a set image for already. So instead of building a server-based image, they'll just take your existing desktop image, convert it into a virtual image, possibly tweak it a little for optimizations, then serve that desktop image out to all their users. This method allows users to get a virtual desktop running Windows 10 or Linux delivered to them wherever they are through the environment. When the user logs off, the desktop is thrown away, and the next time they log in, they get a brand new clean desktop, and all their data is still where they left it. Some users require personalization, and these tend to be IT staff and test dev users. They need to install software to maintain what they're doing. They need to install different versions, different browsers, or they just need extra personalizations within their environment. So what they'll do is each of them will get a desktop that does not get disposed of upon log off, and they'll connect back up to the same desktop every time they log in. Now, the other method I mentioned earlier was using the Citrix managed desktops, which reside in Microsoft Azure. Now, you can put a Citrix virtual desktop in your own Microsoft Azure tenant, or AWS, or Google, or any other, whatever cloud provider you like to use, and you can run your environment that way. Alternatively, if you're in a BCP scenario where you need to get desktops up and running very fast, using a Citrix managed desktop may work. In this case, you're getting the Windows managed desktop service from Azure with extra features provided by Citrix that helps improve the user experience with things like Microsoft Teams support or the share a file for business. You're going to get more peripheral support. You're going to get extra analytics on the sessions. Now, this is a very good method for most businesses when they're trying to expand out their VDI deployments. It may not be the best for the BCP due to how your applications are set up. You always want to make sure a user working on a desktop, that desktop is as close to the applications or the data as they're working on. So if you have remote users, you want to make sure the connection between whatever the application servers or the file servers are using is as close as possible, typically in an environment that's in a corporate data center. When you start using the cloud, you have to make sure you either have very fast connections between the cloud and your data centers, or that your data is also in the cloud. So this is what Kyle was talking about earlier, is City of Corona, they put desktops in the cloud, but they also are moving data into the cloud too. So when their desktops access their data, it's all in that same cloud environment. It's not desktops over here and the data somewhere else in a different state, possibly even. Now, the final method, and this is the most popular method for business continuity, is remote PC access. This is the act of actually taking the PC the users use day to day. You can either manually install it or use enterprise delivery tools like System Center Configuration Manager to push out the client software. Once the client software is pushed out, you can either do something as simple as a PowerShell script or just have the users log into the device. Once the user is logged into the device or a PowerShell script has configured it, if that user connects into the Citrix environment from externally, they will be directed back to the computer that they normally log into in the office up and running. There's no additional server infrastructure to buy. There's no additional virtualization infrastructure to put in place. There's no extra configurations to do because the device is already set up and running. There's no concerns over the performance of the applications and the data they're accessing because it's going to be the exact same connectivity they have if they were in the office because the device physically resides in the office. Now, from a security standpoint, the security is improved because instead of exposing a full virtual private network or VPN between that client device outside and the environment, you are just passing secure Citrix traffic over to Citrix protocol, which is highly optimized for wide area networks. All the actual data still resides within your data center. So if a user opens a file or an email or a document or an application that's got client records or HIPAA protected data on it or whatever it happens to be, that they're getting a picture of it on their screen, but they're not actually getting a copy of it delivered locally. So if that connection is stopped, that data is not left behind on that endpoint device for the user. So it's a very secure way of delivering out the apps and desktops and data users still need in a business continuity environment. It doesn't take on the extra costs of putting in a large infrastructure to host a new virtual app and desktop environment. There's no virtualization tax by having to put a hypervisor in the middle and managing that. It's a very quick and easy and fast solution to put in place. Now, There are some drawbacks as using that as your main primary enterprise-wide work solution, and I do want to cover them as well, just so you're aware of the differences. Now, with the virtual apps and desktops approach, everything is enterprise grade. You're running on server hardware. Everything can be remotely rebooted and connected to and configured remotely. When you're in a remote PC environment, we do include wake on LAN technologies if the device has been turned off. But because it is a desktop computer, if the IT support does need to work on the actual box if it crashes, then you will need to send a staff member into the office to fix it, to reboot it or find it in the cubicle farm. So though it is a very fast and efficient approach to getting out there, there are those couple little drawbacks right there. Now, what we are recommending to customers today is, if you're trying to get a backup capacity plan, a backup continuity plan in place as quick as possible, as cost effective as possible, leverage the remote PC access method. It's the same licensing for any Citrix products. You leverage that access method, push the client out, make sure the users are logged in and get access to their desktops. Have a couple extra or a quantity extra of virtual apps and desktops devices that are configured and ready to go for users in case they're needed. And then if a user has a problem with that remote PC access, where one of those you must visit it on-prem to fix scenarios occurs, then you can quickly just repoint them at the new virtual apps and desktop environment to give them a new desktop out of there. So you're limiting connectivity in that more expensive server hardware to users only users that need it, but you still have it instantly available in case it is necessary to keep operations up and running. And then as your IT staff can go and get to the PC to reboot it, that can occur. Now, we don't see that as a huge problem everywhere, but it is one of those concerns we do want to mention that you are aware of in your planning phases when you go to do a disaster plan. Now, with that, I would like to conclude the webinar. These are some links. So it's architecture planning on how you want to set up a remote PC environment, a video that actually walks through the steps. It's a very short process. And then just more technical references on what the environment entails, what it would take to put it inside, to get it up and running inside your environment. I've also included a recent podcast that includes an interview with Chris McMasters, the CIO of the city of Corona, with many other businesses, talking about what they're doing as part of their disaster recovery planning and continuity planning with Citrix. So with that, I'd like to thank Kyle Edgeworth, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.